This is the Little Moments Count radio podcast, created in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. Each episode, you'll hear interviews with early childhood experts on how to support the important brain development that takes place in the first 1,000 days of life, just through little moments every day. Learn more at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.
All right. This episode of For the Culture is presented in partnership with Little Moments Count and Minnesota Public Radio. Little Moments Count is a statewide collaborative focused on helping parents and caregivers learn about the importance of brain development in the first 3 years of life. Nearly 80% of brain growth happens in the first 1,000 days, and the small moments of interaction like talking, playing, reading, and singing help create the pathways that build a child's brain during this early stage of life. For more information, you can visit at littlemomentscount.org. For the Culture is excited to be partnering with Little Moments Count to host conversations focused on early childhood development. There'll be guests like every month talking about their involvement in Little Moments Count and how they view their role of early childhood development in creating bright futures and strong communities. I got a brother here that I can't wait to talk to. Guy Bowling, right? Guy is the executive director of the Citizen Father Foundation. As a former director of the Father Project, he has overseen substantial multiple grants funded by the Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children, Families, and the Office of Family Assistance. Guy brings over 30 years of experience working with low-income, unmarried, non-custodial fathers, yes sir, and fragile families. In 2012, he received the Ronald F. Johnson Award at the National Center for Strategic Planning and Community Leadership's 14th Annual International Fatherhood Conference. That's dope too. And has been inducted into the Spirit of Fatherhood Hall of Fame. I can't wait to talk to this brother. His specific area of focus is working with low-income, non-custodial, never-married fathers and their families in culturally specific, multiracial, multi-ethnic, and rural communities. As a nationally recognized fatherhood leader and speaker, Mr. Bowling has delivered more than 450 fatherhood trainings, keynotes, consultations, and workshops with public and private agencies in 30 states and 2 countries over 30 plus years in his career. He has a Master of Public Affairs degree from the University of Minnesota Humphrey Institute. He was selected as a 2020 Bush Fellow from the Bush Foundation Fellowship Program. I mean, not to continue to toot the horn. I see you smiling. How you doing, brother? What's up?
I'm doing good, brother. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, happy to be here, brother. Appreciate that intro. I was thinking about, wait, who is he talking about? Me? Wait a minute. A whole lot of information. Yeah, happy to be here, brother.
That means when you're doing good, your reputation to show up before you.
That's right.
That's all that means.
That's right. I appreciate it.
All right, so we're going to jump straight in. Can you start by explaining why the first 3 years of a child's life are so critical for their development? Like, what specific areas of growth are most impacted during this time?
You know, the first 3 years of life for any of us are the most important years for any child as it relates to child development, particularly brain development, because that's when our brain grows the most. And it forms, over 1 million, neural connections per second. Our personalities are formed within those first couple of years. Those early experiences leads to all kind of different emotional regulations for us at an early stage, our language as well as our learning capacity. But at the same time, it sets a strong foundation for future health, behavior, and success. Just in general, it's just critical, those early years in life. Absolutely.
So, I'm a father.
Yep.
So, whenever I have these interviews where I'm talking to fathers, forgive me if I pause a lot and take a breath, because that's just me taking stuff in.
You good, brother.
Can you discuss how talking, playing, reading, and singing with children and these activities contribute to a child's cognitive and emotional and social development?
Oh, 100%. It boosts language, like the interaction that you have with children, even when they're not necessarily knowing how to complete completely fulfill language, but it interacts. Even they have their own little words, their own little sayings, and sometimes you don't even know exactly what they're saying, but they're trying to enunciate because they're learning. So it boosts that language. It also helps with memory. It helps them with that too, because they will begin to try to keep up with you in terms of that level of communication, because there's energy just going back and forth between you and them. And I think it also helps with problem-solving skills. That's that cognitive piece that you were talking about, like figuring stuff out. They by talking, because it's just a level of development that happens within those first couple of years, the communication just increases. And the more they do it, the more repetitive it is, the more effective it ends up being.
So I'm the father of 7.
Oh, not to cut you off, and the last piece I wanted to say is also that bonding that you have with them as a result of that. And a lot of times, we can probably get into this a little later, but that bond that we have with our kids, we don't have the opportunity always, we don't have the opportunity to carry the baby, birth the baby, nurse the baby, right? So oftentimes our connection and bond comes with them after they're already here. We love our kids for sure, but it doesn't happen until we have that interaction. Absolutely.
Yeah, So this is where the segment title. Let me silence my phone. This is where the segment title "Food for the Culture" comes in extra heavy, because I'm fed already, and I feel like this is just going to be as beneficial for my listeners as it is for my listeners.
Sure.
So, in your experience with the Citizen Father Foundation and the Father Project, what common challenges do fathers face in engaging with their young children, and how can they overcome these obstacles?
There's so much, and by no means the few things that I do share, and it is an exhaustive list, but I would have to say oftentimes it's because knowledge, understanding, what does that really mean? What is my role? What is my responsibility? What are my fears? What was my previous references, and even more how I understand what it even means to not only be a father, but man, right? A responsible father, a responsible man. And I think some of it too is the financial stability piece, right? Economically, what is the expenses that it takes to be able to totally care for a child? What income do I actually need? And then I think the other thing is, do you have the parenting knowledge and understanding, as well as the confidence in terms of what type of parent you want to be, and you want to be, and what do you have to reference that? So there's some fear there. And as men, we don't always like to share that information that we don't know, because we are expected to know. Society says we're expected to know. Who knows? Nobody knows. You don't know until you actually start doing it.
Yeah, how are we supposed to just know? Anyway?
That's right.
So statistics, right? Mm-hmm, so a lot of people are big on numbers.
Yep. Yeah.
Can you share some of those compelling statistics or research findings that highlight the long-term benefits of what we're talking about?
There's so many benefits in the long run in terms of children who have an engaged parent, right? Or parents, if they're fortunate to have both parents, right. If they're married or in a healthy relationship, and I really emphasize healthy relationship.
Right.
And at the same time, they're 2 times more likely to do well in school. They're 2 times more likely to be successful at a race to growing up, to be healthy and happy and successful adults down the road. 2 times more likely to not drop out of school. Less likely to not become a teen parent. Less likely to not have kids out of wedlock. So all those things are also beneficial, but also too, I would also say that, it reduces behavioral issues, challenges that you have within school, and potentially if you don't have that, but if you do have that, there's a good chance that they're going to be successful in school just based on their behavior, based on what they're having at home, based on what you're contributing as a parent. And I think the other thing is there are a lot of statistics that say it's linked to, earnings and what ultimately you grow up to be able to do professionally in terms of having a job, to be able to also be in a position of stability.
And those are the things that make you a decent member of society.
That's right.
That's pretty much all the stuff.
That's right. Because I don't know if we always think about it in the terms of especially within the community that I work with first, the fathers, and I work with all fathers, like you were saying in the intro, low income, but all backgrounds, ethnicities, race, cultures. I work with all of them. And so oftentimes they're not given the information about if you put yourself in this position, you end up producing a child. This is all that comes with that. And all this caregiving, all this information that you need to know, all this practice you need to put into place, all these skills you need to have economically, they don't always know what all that brings until it's already here. And a lot of times, a lot of the kids, in terms of the parents that I work with, they're not planned and they don't come with a whole lot of forethought. It's just here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great thing that you said. I mean, a great point that you just made, because to piggyback off that, like not a lot of us are going to realize the impact that our involvement is going to have. Like, I think the fathers, as we get older, I think we get it.
Yeah.
But I don't know that initially it's there. So how can we better educate communities about this crucial relationship that we're talking about?
I'm a huge fan, Brother Michael, Mike, you go by Mike?
Mike,
okay.
Either one.
I'm a huge fan of storytelling. I'm a huge fan of, power of conversion is a testimony. So you got to allow people to tell their stories, right? From what they've come from, because it shapes us for who we are and who we come to be and who we can even strive to be. So I think you just have to continuously tell those stories and be honest about it, and I think about my own story. I didn't know what it meant to be a dad. Why? Because my father was absent, right? Yeah. And then majority of my friends' fathers were absent. Nobody talked to me about that, right? So how could I possibly know? We didn't study it in school. I didn't get trained. I didn't get none of that. And I think the other thing is to tell those stories and be visual, and so they can see the men for who they are. I also think that, talking to community leaders and organizations and make sure they have the information to be able to share the stories as well within their community, so have an understanding. Because oftentimes there's two spectrums. People either think your father is supposed to be like the character now, the character of Cliff Huxtable, you're supposed to be like him, or you're supposed to be you are the father on Maury, right?
Oh, wow,
so those are the perspectives, right?
Yeah.
And so, but the real thing is somewhere in between. It's somewhere in between. And so that's the reality. And I think the other way for people to know is just continue to do campaigns, public awareness campaigns, and continue to share the information, because the majority of the men that I've had the opportunity to work with over the last 30 plus years, I have yet, Brother Mike, run into a father that says, I just don't want to be a father. I have yet to run into that. There's things that get in the way of me being a father, but nobody actually says, I don't want to do that.
Oh, my goodness.
No.
So things that get in the way, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about you work with all kinds of fathers, all ethnicities, all that, right?
Yep.
Talk about the economic factors, right? Like how do the economic factors play a role in a father's ability to engage with their children during these years? Like, I kind of know, but give me some game.
Well, some of the economic, I have to say, being gainfully employed, right, or entrepreneur, right, but having the financial resources to be able to cover your expenses, and includes your child, right? And I think oftentimes that instability can lead to all kind of stress, all kind of challenges, all kind of emotional, mental health issues. It could lead to, unfortunately, the relationship going sour, your own self-esteem in terms of unable to provide for my child, and that takes a toll on you, because we are informed that in order to be a good father, a lot of times society says you have to provide for your child financially. That's one aspect of it. That's one aspect.
But that ends up being like the most
highlighted. Yeah. Well, because part of it is because the male is expected to be the provider, right? He's expected to be the protector, right? In addition to, we don't get into the emotional health, right? The emotional connection in terms of, most of the time, if you think about it when we were shorties, right? You think about, although the games is cool, although the gear that you buy is cool, all the things that you can purchase, but we don't talk about for the child. It's really about you just being there, having the experience to do that, and that don't cost nothing.
Nope.
That don't cost nothing, brother.
Nope, man. That's like That's one of the tips. Give me some more tips that you can provide for parents, like on how to have these meaningful interactions, like added into their daily routines.
I think everything from, making sure that you're there with them. Oftentimes, black fathers, let me get real specific, although, they, for the most part, rule from the bottom, and it may not be economically stable in most situations, but black fathers are the most involved fathers of all the groups of fathers in our society in terms of being involved in daily routines, putting them to bed, reading them stories, fixing their food, when they have access to them. Now, if they don't, that's a whole nother situation. But most of the time, those routines include everything from, having dinner with the kids, putting the kids to bed, reading them stories, everything from just having conversations with them, even in the car, even in the home, even just out and about and experience, because children love that interaction. I think the other thing is, and then the other thing, I just remember, growing up, but it still rings true for today, chores, right? You got a responsibility to do chores,
sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And then obviously, I remember too, and also what I teach is that, listening, right? Listening is so critical, because I remember, my generation, I don't know about you, brother, but I'm pretty sure you're aware of it. Do as I say, not as I do, right?
As I do.
That was the generation, right? And I think the other thing is that, you have to make sure that you having that eye contact with folks. I remember, some of the males when I was coming up, be it my father wasn't there, but I had uncles and other men. They'd always say, "Look me in the eye when you talk to me. Look at me when you talk to me. Hold your head up. Hold your straight, sit up straight." So those are a couple of things.
What's crazy is because of that being instilled in me at such a young age, I do it now.
Yeah.
Right. Especially when I want to let the person that I'm talking to know that I'm really engaged in what it is that you're saying.
That's right.
But I also come to, because I work with young people as well, I end up coming to a realization that there's been a disconnect in that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of somewhere along the lines we lost that a little bit, and now to get it back, you have to address that some young people are going to be uncomfortable if you look at them too long.
Exactly.
And then you got to be able to attack it at the root a
That's
little
right.
bit.
That's
teach them this is why I'm looking at you like that.
I'm glad that you said that, because part of the newer generation, you just have to be more creative in terms of how you get your point across, but also in a way that doesn't come across as too authoritative, right, or too structured. But you model the behavior that you expect of them, and then you have the conversation with them on the rationale behind why. As opposed to generations ago, you just had to do it because they told you to do it. You don't have no choice to do it.
Right.
But kids don't respond that way to this day.
Nah.
You got to model it. You got to explain it to them, and then you got to tell them the long-term benefits of it. So it takes a longer period of time to do that, but it's effective.
Yeah, my kids call those lectures.
Exactly.
My kids call those lectures.
Okay.
Shout out to all of my kids.
That's right.
Y'all love hearing that right there.
That's right.
Let's see. As someone who has significantly influenced fatherhood initiatives, what successes have you witnessed in families that actively participate in early childhood engagement? So, give me some stories.
Yeah. Again, when you know more, you do more, right? And I think I've witnessed it from the standpoint of folks coming and working with me because they're in some sort of crisis. Something has impacted their ability to function. They want some guidance, some direction, some resources on what to do. And so what we do is provide them with services to put them in a position to just have equal footing, just, to level the playing field so they can even just be available for them. And then once you establish them in those positions, and then next thing you know, they're easily able to follow direction and guidance once they get some of those major stressors out of the way, some of those major barriers out of the way. And then you can't even stop them from showing you they're applying what they've learned from you, what they have picked up from you, and you'll see them doing that with their kids. And you see it in real time. You see it in real time, brother.
It's the long game.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I love knowing that there's a lot of brothers out here, because while you're doing it, you don't really... you know that there's other people out here doing it, but you don't really get to see it as much.
Yeah.
So to hear somebody else reference, and then have me recognize, that's the long game.
That's right.
That he's talking about, that you kind of have to go through if you really want to impact these young people.
And for yourself, you have to begin to not only get the knowledge, right? Because again, like I was saying, if you know better, you do better. And you got to apply that knowledge. Then you got to practice that knowledge.
Yeah.
And then you have to even sometimes have to revise, your approach to it. And then there's other pieces on, you evolve, right? I remember, a lot of times when I'm bringing fathers together, we have parent education groups, and we talk to them with all kind of different topics, everything from health and safety to nutrition to discipline to punishment to, co-parenting and all those things. And I think that once you begin to learn about that, there's a particular approach, and a lot of us evolve. I just remember, when I was originally raising my first son, I was all about structure, discipline. And now I have grandkids now who are 9 and 11. The structure part works, the discipline works, but so does you got to have a balance too in terms of the why, and you got to have the conversation. You have to listen, and so I think you have to evolve. And I wasn't always there. It was more about do I as I say because I said it. But now you have to hear them out, man.
Okay, so earlier we referenced what society has us believe in, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can we shift the perception to promote more positive father involvement?
I think that you have to dispel the myths and the stereotypes, right? Because I think a lot of times people make the assumption of fathers who are not involved is because they're deadbeat, right? Mm-hmm. They don't want to be involved. And you get that label, right? When, child support has a huge, piece in that too, because oftentimes dads are having to pay child support or expected to pay child support because mom has gotten the system and she's getting resources and they want a return on that investment, and they usually don't want it from her, they want it from him.
That's a great way to put that.
Right. So she basically signs up for resources because most of the time he's probably eligible for them same resources if he'd apply because both of them need help, right? But they're available for her, not so much for him. And then they say to him, you got to pay us back, so you got to pay child support. He's like, oh, wait, what is this, right? So he don't know always what or how. So a lot of times he may not do anything, right? And then here comes the consequences. Here comes the penalties, for sure.
Oh, man.
It could be daunting, brother, but there's a silver lining to it, though.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm just thinking, I just turned 42 in last September, so I'll be 43 this year.
Okay.
And I've been a father since I was like 18, 19.
Oh, you was a young father. Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
At this point, it's like several laps.
Yeah. You taking,
So when I'm hearing you describe it, it's like that breathing is just like me realizing, like, yep.
Yeah.
This is the advice, but this is what you needed.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, brother, because I was a young parent as well, right? But again, statistics show, I don't know if you grew up with your father, without your father, but statistics show if he's not there or he's sporadically there, the likelihood of you becoming a father when you're not ready is highly likely, right? So I was a father at 16. So what could I have? I didn't know anything about even being a man, let alone a father. Right. I knew how children got here, but I didn't know what all they came with that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I was a much younger father.
I have this like part of the show, at the end where I try to get like some closing food, like some food for the culture. So it's going to be with this question. Okay. So what message would you leave to our listeners with regarding the vital role they play in shaping the futures of their children through early engagement?
Yeah, a couple of them. I think just continue to strive to be the best that you possibly can as a parent, as a father, I'll say specifically to your question. But also, too, and understand you're not always going to get it right. Mm-hmm. But continue to learn, practice, evolve, right? Refine, and also knowing that your presence just matters, period. Even if you don't have all the skills, all the knowledge, your presence is critical. And I think because no matter how big, no matter how small, it all shapes your child's future. Those experiences. It's funny because I have a daughter now who's in college. She's actually in law school, and I didn't come from all of that, but she went to these schools and got, an idea what she wanted to do, and ultimately she's in law school. I still get texts from her from time to time because me and her mother split up when she was probably 2 or 3 years old, but I still spent that quality time with her. We had arrangements and things of that nature where I would see my daughter every other week, and we had split custody. And so she sends me texts out of nowhere from things we used to do when we were younger, quotes from different things that she remembered that we actually experienced together, and so they don't forget get that stuff, that experience. So it's more about the experience. She don't send me texts about, remember when you bought me this? No, remember when we did this, right? So I think the other piece is you understanding your love, your presence, and just being there is not about being perfect, but just being there, having that connection with them. And I think that it can start at any time. So if you haven't, you can. And just knowing that you continue, because what I've come to understand, and you probably have heard this, and definitely that narrative is out there, that, you know, you only have to be a parent for 18 years, and then after that, no, you're a parent for life, brother. They will need you for life.
Need you for life. So just be there.
That's right. That's right. Be present.
Just be present.
That's right. That's right.
You can hear a recording of this show at littlemomentscount.org/podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Little Moments Count, you can visit their website at littlemomentscount.org. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to have
man.
this opportunity with you, brother.
Consider yourselves fed. 98.9 FM. KRSM Radio for All, still National Poetry Month. We'll talk about some literary techniques in the form of me using music, right? First, I want to do a little lesson on imagery. This is your boy, Big Mike. Everything we do is for the culture.
Thanks for listening to the Little Moments Count radio podcast in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. You can find the Little Moments Count radio podcast wherever you get your podcasts and at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.